It is time to break it down once again, solo style though this week. No Megan Kinna, unfortunately for those of you watching at home, you're gonna have to deal with myself, Tino Fera, for this episode, but don't worry, she will be back eventually. For now, it is just me for this episode, and because of that, and also because of the fact that we are actually under a week away from the trade deadline in the BC Junior A Lacrosse League, we thought let's do something a little bit different here on this episode. Rather than breaking down the past week's worth of games, let's preview the trade deadline, talk about the teams that I think, in my opinion, should be buyers versus sellers, some moves that we've already seen as well. Spoiler alert, the Poco Saints have been involved in a lot of them. That should give you a little bit of a preview as to what category they fall into in terms of buyers and sellers. I'll let you guys figure that out here, and I'll fill you in on the correct answer here by the end of the show momentarily. But there has been a lot of movement throughout the league so far to start out the season, and again, under a week away from the trade deadline. In BC, the deadline is June 30th at 10 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. The deadline over in Ontario has already passed. That was on June 21st. I've been looking for the trade deadline in the Rocky Mountain Lacrosse League, and I have not been able to find it, but just based on what we've seen in the past, have to assume that it falls within these two windows from Ontario and BC. But as mentioned, there has already been some movement in the BC Junior A Lacrosse League, so let's take a look at what we've seen so far. It started early in the season. We'll recap a trade between Coquitlam and Burnaby that we've already seen. We've already talked about it, so we'll go through this one quickly. It was Oscar Lucas, who was acquired from Burnaby in exchange for Caden Lee, just a quick goaltender swap that sends Caden Lee over to Burnaby in exchange for forward Oscar Lucas over to Coquitlam, and he has fit in quite nicely on that left side, joining forces with Ryan Colsey, Parker Kennedy, among some other guys. And I'm not entirely sure if the Adanax are done before the end of the deadline here. Now we can get into some of the movement, though, that we've seen in the past week or so, with a little bit of an asterisk there. And we'll start off with the Nanaimo Timbermen. The first trade or the first player they acquired, this is where the asterisk comes in, because this is the one that wasn't necessarily in the last week or so. Luke Neary coming over from the Poco Saints. He's actually an Island kid. He was a former first overall pick to the Poco Saints. He will stay on the island for the remainder of the season, as he has been for the bulk of this season, and will continue to play for the Nanaimo Timbermen. As well, though, in the past week, Nanaimo continuing to be busy in the shopping market with the Poco Saints, acquiring defender Joel Mullen, as well as goaltender Ashton Brown. So Nanaimo bolstering their team a little bit. We've already talked a lot about them being a very senior-heavy team and how they want to push and make this year count, push towards that Minto Cup. We'll talk a little bit more about them in a little bit here after we get down some more of these trades. Moving on to the new Westminster Salmon Bellies. They were also busy shopping with popular partners here this year, the Poco Saints. They acquired defender Levi Tui. He's been a player that we've talked about a lot on this show as well, in terms of him setting new career highs in virtually every statistical category this year. He's a big pickup on the defensive end for the Bellies. Finally, the last trade, and arguably the biggest one that we saw last week, still featured the Poco Saints, but that was the only BC team that trade was focused on, because Josh Mills, star forward for the Poco Saints, was dealt out east to the Toronto Beaches. He has actually already played a game for the Beaches. He got into the lineup on Monday night for Toronto's game against Peterborough. He had a goal in that game. Toronto did wind up winning. So that is a massive pickup for the Toronto Beaches as they try to be the second team to represent Ontario at this year's upcoming Minto Cup. We can go down the league standings real quick, but the most important thing you got to keep your eye on is the top four, and then the fifth place team, who is the new Westminster Salmon Bellies, just on the outside. They are a very interesting team that we will talk about. We're going to go down all these teams in order of the standings, but Coquitlam still sits atop at number 1. Victoria is at number 2. And then it is the Delta Islanders, my dark horse Delta Islanders, sitting in third place, followed by the Nanaimo Timbermen. Again, it is the new Westminster Salmon Bellies, who are just on the outside looking in, sitting in fifth place. After that one, it's Langley, it's Poco, and it's the Burnaby Lakers that have been shifting spots for the last couple of weeks. Let's get into some more of this trade deadline talk here, shall we? And let's start off with this Coquitlam Adanax team. I put them, there's kind of a few different categories here for my classification. I have buyers, obviously. I have sellers, obviously. And then the kind of middle in between of that of just being buyers or sellers. Coquitlam, they are perennial sellers. They are in the obviously buyers category. I should correct that. Perennial buyers. They're currently atop of the league standings at 9-2, as mentioned. It's hard to say, in my opinion, necessarily what this team is in need of when they are such a dominant force in BC this year, as they usually are. The thing that I think a lot about with this team is that I just feel like they're missing like a little bit of juice. I'm struggling to find another way to put that, for lack of a better term, so I'll just use that, juice. And what I mean by that is, you look at their team from last year, and I just feel like they're missing some of what guys like Ryan Favreau brought, some of what guys like David Charney brought in terms of the offensive guys. Like, those are two key players that have aged out of junior lacrosse at the end of last year, but they brought so much. David Charney was a guy who was so fierce on the forecheck. And Ryan Favreau was a guy who just got into the dirty areas of the floor, got a lot of second chance opportunities in terms of rebounds, going to the corner, or just going into those dirty areas where not a lot of players have a ton of success unless they just have that want to get there. Ryan Favreau was one of those guys. I do expect Coquitlam to still be busy here at the deadline, but I even go back to their defensive end as well, sort of in that same category as the forwards, but on the back end, you're missing guys now like Remo Shanato. He was a big hulking presence. Connor Knock, who was another acquisition for Coquitlam last year. Those were a couple of big bodies, intimidating bodies on the back end. That's not to say that this Coquitlam team doesn't still have characters and pieces on their team that can be that dominant force. I think that they very much so do. Talking about guys in the back end, like their captain, Ty Banks, for example, he is just an absolute force, but I wouldn't mind seeing them get a little bit more of that intimidation if there are guys that are made available out west here. And the name that you always have to have circled when it comes to the Coquitlam Adanax at the trade deadline is Cody Malowski of the Langley Thunder. Might he be available for the third straight year? Might he become an Adanac for the third straight year at the trade deadline? We will see. It's all up to Langley here if they decide that they want to sell or if they want to try to make some push to get into that fourth and final playoff spot by the end of this regular season. It's really up to them. And I'll talk a little bit more about the Langley Thunder as we progress once we get to them in the standings. But as always, that is a name to keep your eye on when it comes to the Coquitlam Adanax. Will they be able to get their guy for the third straight year? Let's move on to the Victoria Shamrocks. I already mentioned they're in second place in the league standings. I put them in the buyers, obviously, category, once again, just like Coquitlam, just with where they are in the standings, how successful of a year that they've had so far. I think this is a team where their strength is that they're a young, athletic team, especially on the back end. They have a lot of speedy guys that love to move up in transition. And they have one of the best goaltending tandems in the league in Angus Snow and Grayson Manning. I think they're solid in goal for the next couple of years here. I would still like to see Victoria go out and get another offensive piece, a guy that can be maybe a number one in terms of lefties. They have Jet Klassen, who leads the team in goals and points. Goals, he has 29 on the year. Points, he's a 43. But there's a massive drop-off in terms of goals after Jet Klassen, and he, of course, mans the right side. He does have a number one facilitator who is a lefty on that Victoria team in Carter Quested. He actually is second in the team in points with 42, so just one behind Jet Klassen, and he's first in assists with 34. So they have kind of that 1-2 punch. I still would like to see them get a number one guy or a quarterback, so to speak, in terms of a lefty that can just their offense a little bit. I think sometimes, and we mentioned on last week's episode as well, that they've kind of come down to earth a little bit after an incredibly strong start to the season. I do still think this is a really high quality team, but I think that the ceiling in terms of their progression only goes up if they can find another key offensive piece, and I think specifically they'd be looking at a lefty. I do also wonder if they'd like to upgrade their size a little bit on the back end. As mentioned, they're a very athletic, very speedy group. I think defense is a strong point for them. I wonder if they would like to add a little bit of size to their defensive core. For the Delta Islanders, okay, so I guess I added another category here because I put these guys into the category of stand pat, and there's a couple of reasons why I don't know if anticipate is the right word, but why my opinion would be I think they should just kind of stay where they are. I think that this is a young team still, and they have a very bright future, and I think they've caught a lot of people outside of their own organization by surprise here. I don't know if I love the idea of them selling and getting rid of some of their young guys for the sake of bringing in somebody for them to make a push right now. I think this is a team, this is why I say that they have a bright future. I think this is a team that in the coming years has a really strong chance at pushing to be a representing team at the Minto Cup, especially when the Minto does come back to BC in a couple of years and BC will have two teams representing. I think Delta will be wanting to make a push come that time, as well as the year in between that, to see how much progression they can make. I think if they do make the playoffs this year, which they have a very strong chance at it, currently sitting in third place overall, I think this is a team that can really benefit, especially among their younger players who could really benefit from the experience of a playoff series or two. I think that's kind of the next step in terms of the progression of the Delta Islanders. But again, I do just want to confirm here, all of this is speculative. All of this is my opinion. This is not based on anything that I've heard from anybody. This is just my opinion when it comes to these teams. With that, we can move on to the last remaining playoff team at the moment, sitting in the fourth and final playoff seed, is the Nanaimo Timbermen. We've talked so much about this team in the early stages of the season in terms of them being very senior heavy. I think this would be a waste, very much so, of their season, of their seniors, if they do not go all in here. I think they're just wasting the final years of this senior team if they decide to stand pat or even sell by any means. And I think they've already shown, obviously, by some of the trades that they've made this year, that they do not plan on selling by any means. This is a buying team, and I think that they're still shopping around to try to get some more pieces into their lineup. I do think by their own expectations, I think that they would say that they've maybe underachieved a little bit, or at the very least, maybe not hit the mark that they would have liked to by now. But that's the key thing about the trade deadline, is you get a couple of extra pieces, give them a little bit more time to gel with the team, and you hit the ground running, ideally going into the playoffs. And I think this is still going to be a team to watch. We talk so much about their experience, about kind of the veterans on this team. I think that this is going to be a team to watch with that experience once they get into some of these playoff series, especially if they go longer and longer. They have already acquired Ashton Brown from Poco, so it's going to be very interesting to watch how they work with this goaltending tandem now of Ashton Brown and Keegan Okino. Brown has already played a game now for the Nanaimo Timbermen. It was a win over the new Westminster Salmon Bellies, I believe. But now, do they still look at Okino as their number one? Do they use Ashton Brown as their number one? Or is it a 50-50 split maybe, and see who really takes the reins? I think this takes a little bit of the load off the shoulders of Keegan Okino, and Ashton Brown has proven last year and through much of this year as well that he is very much still an elite goaltender in this league. He can very much so help this Nanaimo Timbermen. This is another team, though, that I do think could also benefit by getting a lefty on their offensive side. They have Andrew Bowman as kind of their number one lefty. I do see him, while he can fill the net, I do see him as more so a facilitator, a guy that can pass the rock around a ton and pile up points like that. Jeremy Woodrick is currently the number one righty, and he has just been Mr. Consistent for that team on the offensive side of the ball in terms of just filling the net like crazy. He and Andrew Bowman work so well together on both sides. I do think that they would benefit from getting another lefty that can fill the net. They currently have Sam Struther, who does a lot of the goal scoring. He's still a really good option, but I do think another lefty that can, as mentioned, put the ball in the back of the net would be massive for them. That's where, I mean, to get into specifics here, I do wonder if they continue to shop around with Poco a little bit. Their left side has been their talking point all year, offensively speaking. Andrew Cowan is still a guy that's currently rostered for Poco. Lincoln Wall is currently a guy as well in just a second year. So there are options out there if they want to continue to shop with a team that they've already done some deals with. We'll see if those two names get dealt at some point, but I will be keeping my eye on the Nanaimo Timbermen on that front. I do also know that Nanaimo had a lot of interest, especially in the offseason as well, in a guy like Josh Mills. But of course, we already talked about that. Mills goes over to Ontario now, playing for the Toronto Beaches. The next place team, the fifth place team in the BC Junior A standings, is the New Westminster Salmon Bellies. And this is one that I kind of just need to sit with for a little bit. So I have them listed here as buyers, not obviously, and I don't even necessarily know if this were up to me, this would be a team that stands pat, I think. Maybe like acquires a player or two. They did already, we already talked about this as well, acquired defenseman Levi Tui from the Poco Saints. The reason why this is an interesting team for me is we've mentioned already the trajectory of this team and how they're kind of, I would say, just over the hump of their rebuild, and how they're a team that wants to contend for the Minto Cup the next time it is in BC in a couple of years here. I don't know how much it benefits them to start selling guys. However, they do have a very key piece in Lucas Nielsen. He's a fifth-year guy. He's a 50-goal scorer from just a year ago. He's now an NLL champion after his rookie season with the Buffalo Bandits. This is a guy that could get you a ton in return. And he is a name that's been rumored. I know there's some teams out east that have been very interested in him. I would imagine some teams out west here are also very interested in him. A team like the Coquitlam Adanax, I wonder if they would go after him, or even Nanaimo as a team that will be likely battling against Coquitlam at some point in the late stages of this season, maybe even into the postseason as well. I wonder if this New West team would benefit from selling a guy like Lucas Nielsen, getting a big return back and using that to continue to build and to continue to progress this rebuild to put them in an even better position next year and the following season when the Minto is back in BC. We'll see though, and the reason why this one is a little bit confusing, I guess I should say, is they've almost put themselves in the category of buyers considering they made that Levi Tui trade. I do also think that, I mean, Megan and I talked on last week's episode about how last week was a big week for the New Westminster Salmon Bellies in terms of their schedule. They had 4 games. They ended the week with a 2-2 record in that stretch. Obviously not necessarily where they would have liked to have been. They started the week 2-0. They end the week 0-2. I think if they do find a way to go 3-1 in last week's games, or even 4-0, I think that they have a different outlook come the trade deadline. But I mean, we'll see, like mentioned, under a week away. I do wonder, though, if they are also looking, if they are considering themselves a buyer. We'll see. The coming days will be the defining factor there. But if they do decide that they want to be buyers, I wonder if they'd be interested in Cody Malowski as well to get another lefty over, or if Malowski isn't made available, or if that deal is done to Coquitlam. If it does happen, Bailey Vanichuk is another name from the Langley Thunder that I would be very interested in. He's a guy that works well with Malowski and has been putting up points for that team as probably the number 2 lefty. I would argue the number 1 lefty while Malowski was still over in Denver. Time will tell. Next up is the Langley Thunder, and this is probably going to be the most talked about team because of the big piece that they have, and we've already talked about them a bunch in terms of Coquitlam shopping, as they always do. It is their captain. It is Cody Malowski. He was a Minto Cup MVP a couple of years ago, the first year that he was dealt over to the Adanax, and the Minto was over in Edmonton. And he was a massive piece for Coquitlam in last year's Minto Cup, scoring 4 goals in the final of Game 2 against the Orangeville Northmen. I think once the season starts, Coquitlam is probably immediately kicking tires and just wondering if Cody would be available again. Last year, I know it came down to the 11th hour before that deal got done. Might that happen again? Cody Malowski is a guy that will bring a massive return, as he does always. And again, just in my own opinion here, while we've kind of joked and talked a lot about the Langley Thunder on this show a ton, I do think it would massively benefit them to sell for even just one more year. You're in the final year of Cody Malowski. This is another very young and very up-and-coming team that could contend in a year or two. Why not get one last return for your captain and try to bolster those chances for a couple of years? We'll see. I already mentioned Bailey Vanachuk as well. Might he be a name that ends up on another team other than the Langley Thunder? We'll see. They do also have a couple of interesting defenders, but we could talk about this team for so much longer that we don't really have the time for. We've already talked about them a ton this season. Their goaltending position is locked up. You know all about the Langley Thunder by this point. And that will lead us to our last place team at the moment, the Burnaby Lakers. They fall into the sellers, obviously, category with them being the last place team. They will not make the playoffs. They're just going to continue to try to get their young guys into the lineup, try to get as good of performances as humanly possible as they can for the rest of the year, and try to really look to the offseason and look to next year and years to come as well. The thing that's a little bit interesting about Burnaby is that they don't necessarily have a ton available to sell. Maybe a couple of defenders. I mean, like on the offensive side, I look at Daniel Battiston and Alexander Cartwright. Those have kind of been two of the guys on Burnaby for most of the season, honestly, the entire season. On the defensive end, I look at a guy like AJ Payne. The thing that's curious about him for me, though, is that he's only gotten into the lineup twice this year. I'm not sure if there's an injury there or if there's something else going on, but if you're looking for a defender, AJ Payne is a name that I would be intrigued about. On the offensive end, Daniel Battiston and Alexander Cartwright. I do wonder, though, if they're like the number one and number two guy on Burnaby's offense. I'm not entirely sure if they would be in that role on another playoff team in the BC Junior A League. I think they would most likely be like a 3 or 4 kind of guy. Like, how do they slide into that role? Time will tell. Those are just a couple of names to look at for the Burnaby Lakers as we go towards the trade deadline. We skipped over the Poco Saints. My mistake. We talked so much about them. Okay, well, let's quickly talk about the Poco Saints. We went over to Burnaby, so let's go back one. They're the 7th place team, and they fall into the sellers, obviously, category, and obviously because of the deals that we've already seen throughout this season and throughout this week. They make a few deals with Nanaimo, sending over Joel Mullen, sending over Ashton Brown, sending over Luke Neary, just to name a couple of guys. They send Josh Mills over to the Toronto Beaches, just to name a few. This is a team, though, that I don't think are done. I do still think that they have some key pieces that other teams would be interested in. I already mentioned a guy like Andrew Cowan. He's a 4th-year lefty forward. He set a new career high in assists back in 2023 with 52. Obviously, it's been a bit of a down year for, I would say, Poco's offense overall this year, so I think that speaks to some of his limited numbers. But that's not a shot at the quality of player you'd be getting with a guy like Andrew Cowan. He is one of the top facilitators, one of the top passers in this league. And again, already talked about Lincoln Wall. He's just in his 2nd year. He's still a very young forward, but for much of the season, when Josh Mills was out for a game or two, Lincoln Wall was the guy that really led the way on the offensive side of the ball for Poco. At different points of the season, he's led this team in goals, in points. He can play a massive role depending on the role that you put him in, and he's another interesting name to keep your eye on. For the defensive end of the Poco Saints, Jordan Meach is another guy. He's a 4th-year lefty defenseman, kind of a transition piece, I guess you could say. Very much so a ton of offensive upside. Back in his minor lacrosse days, he was actually more so looked at as an offensive piece. Once he hit the junior ranks, he started to play more of a defensive role, but he loves to push the ball in transition. He loves to get onto the offensive side, and he's always a threat to go to the net. And that's without really losing much on the defensive side. He still takes care of his defensive end of the floor. He still gets key matchups. He is just also very athletic. He has a good shot, and he has a knack for getting to the net. That is another name on the defensive end for the Poco Saints that I would keep my eye on. That is all 8 teams in the BC Junior A Lacrosse League. Before we officially conclude this show, a bit of a shorter episode this week on the breakdown. I just want to quickly go down the upcoming matchups for this coming week. It is another busy week in the BC Junior A League as we get closer and closer towards the playoff push. 9 games coming up in total that we will break down all of in their entirety on next week's episode of the Breakdown. Again, you can catch those on Wednesday afternoons when those go live. We have Delta versus Victoria. We have Coquitlam Burnaby, as you're seeing on your screen here. New West Langley, Burnaby versus Poco, Coquitlam versus Nanaimo, Burnaby versus Victoria, Langley, Delta, Nanaimo, Langley, and Victoria versus Poco to wrap things up at the end of next weekend. All right, sorry folks that you had to deal with just a solo episode. You had to deal with my voice for an entire breakdown. So we'll get back to the two-person show here once we get back at it next week, and we will again break down the entire week's worth of games. But for now, that's going to do it for the entire crew of Trick Shot. I've been Tino Fera.